Hi, this is Dr. Jabali, and in this video, we're going to talk about topic 4.1, which is all about species and community. This is a section from the ecology chapter. So, here are what are the understandings that we have learned for this section. We're going to learn what the species is all about. We're going to talk about how species, the members of the species, they have to go through reproduction in order to be able to continue the generations. We're also going to talk about how sometimes they are isolated, and that means separating their populations. We're going to talk if they are autotrophic or heterotrophic, their ways of nutrition they do, how do the consumers eat their food, the detritivores, how do they do their food too, as well as the saprotrophs, what are they, what do they do, how do they eat. We're also going to talk about what is a community and what is it formed from, and what are the interactions that happens with the environment, the abiotic environment that they live in. We're also going to talk about how the autotrophs, they are obtaining their inorganic nutrients. We're also going to talk about the inorganic nutrients and how they keep on this nutrient cycle that is going around. We are going to talk about how to make sure that the ecosystem is continue and being sustainable for a long period of time. And in this case, we're going to use mesocosm, which is one of the practicals. There's one that you have to know for the IB exams, paper 3. And of course, we're going to talk about classifying what autotroph, consumers, detritivores, and saprotrophs are and their mode of their nutritions. So first thing we're going to start here is with species. We have to know exactly what the species is. And it's a group of organisms that can potentially interbreed. When I say interbreed, that means they can actually reproduce and they can actually produce a baby that is alive, because the word viable means here is being alive. So there is no crossing between two different species. You have to understand this. It's usually within exactly the same species that there is this crossing happening. But if by any chance we do cross two different species, in this case, we're going to produce a hybrid. And usually, most of the time, these hybrids are sterile. And the word sterile means that they cannot reproduce. That means they cannot have their own babies. So an example here would be the horse with the donkeys. If you cross a horse for donkeys, you will get a mule. Now, after you have a mule, the mule cannot have his own babies because the mule is sterile. But if you do cross here, in the case, two different types of horses, you definitely can continue with a horse that is reproductively available. So within the same species, it's possible. But outside the species, more likely you're going to produce a baby that cannot have children. When it comes to population, now this is a group of organisms and they are the same species. That's very important. And they're living at the same location, right? The same area at the same time. That's what population means. It's a group of the same species. So it's the same thing as saying a group of Americans living at a city of, I don't know, Cincinnati, which is an American city, at the same place. It's the same group of species. It's just humans. Now, we will see later that this has nothing to do with community, population. It is the most important thing that you got to keep in mind. It's the same species, okay? Now, these organisms can live in different places, but if they are, then they're most likely to be different populations. Now, here is one important thing about the populations. They should be able to interbreed. That means they should be able to reproduce. If they can't reproduce because of some reproduction isolation, and they can't reproduce, then they would not be classified anymore as population. So they should be in the same area, and they should be able to interbreed with each other. Now, moving on, we have here community. Community will be a group of population living together, but this doesn't have to be the same population, the same species. So that means I can have a population of giraffes, a population of pig, a population of lions. So there's 3 different populations, but these 3 populations are living together in that given area. That would have been known as a community. When it comes to habitat, this is the place where, or should I say the environment in which all these species are actually living their lives. When I say ecosystem, it's not just a giraffe population, a pig population, but also we include the environment. That means the trees, the soil, the water. And these are known as abiotic because the word a means no and biotic means life. So all the things that are non-living, like in this case, I wouldn't say trees, but I would say more like soil. We will see water, we see the air. These were known as the environment, the habitat. So the difference between the community and ecosystem is the community is just the populations living together. Ecosystem is the populations plus the soil, the rocks, the water, the air. And when it comes to the word ecology, basically we're studying the relationship between all these living things and its environment. That means we study how let's say a spider is walking through the rock, or we're seeing how the fish is swimming through the water. That's what ecology is about. It's to study how we interact with each other. So basically at this point, we're just looking at the definitions. Now here is a perfect example of pictures that was posted by BioNinja, in which clearly shows the difference between these 5 words that can come out as a multiple choice in IB exams. So species, you can see this is one species different than the other one. So we can see 4 species. When they have many more of them, then that's a population, that's a second population, that's a third and a fourth. Now in a community, it's when these species of different species, they start to interact with each other in a certain area. That area is known as the habitat, and that ecosystem is me studying all of them, all the populations, the environment, and see how they interact with each other. That's an ecosystem. And of course, ecology will be studying all of that. So these are the 5 things. Now we got to talk about nutrition. That means how do they eat? What is their way of living and eating? So there's 2 ways types first. We have the autotroph and the heterotroph. Now, the autotroph, these usually they produce their own organic molecules from inorganic molecules. So, for example, they can go from a carbon dioxide, right, to become a glucose. And we know that this carbon dioxide here was known as inorganic. And this one was known as organic. So this is what, like a photosynthesis, that's what plants are doing. Now, heterotroph on the other one, this is the opposite. This basically means that organisms are eating other organic molecules from other organisms. So this is more like us eating chicken, meats and stuff like this, and plants. So that's what heterotroph will be. Now, when it comes to autotroph, we have 2 options. It can be from the light, which is photoautotroph, or it can be from chemicals. So it's just remember that we are making organic molecules, right? It's all about making organic molecules. And it can come from the sun, or you're making organic molecules that are coming from oxidation of chemicals. So chemoautotrophs usually can see more in the sea, and photoautotrophs can usually see in the land. So in this case, both of them mostly likely to be plants, because plants are the only ones that is autotrophs. Now, heterotroph in this case, we have 3 options. We have consumers, we have detritivores, and we have saprotrophs. The consumers, they usually digest organic matter, of course, of living or recent killed ones. And examples of consumers is herbivores, carnivores, and scavengers. When it comes to detritivore, they ingest a non-living, and that's important that you mention that it's non-living matters, like earthworm and woodlice. And when it comes to saprotroph, they also feed on the non-living organisms, but this time they're secreting the enzymes outside of its body and then absorbing the product. So that means the digestion is happening on the outside while detritivores is happening on the inside. In this case, for the saprotrophs can be bacteria and fungi. So you do have to know examples. And it's the saprotrophs, and that's the most important thing, is that you need to know the saprotrophs are the decomposers, not the detritivores, okay? The decomposers are the saprotrophs, not the detritivores. Why am I saying this? Because it happens to fall a lot in IB exams, and a lot of students make that confusion between these 2. But again, it's the saprotrophs that are the decomposers. So here we have, again, just to make sure that you know the difference between the autotrophs and the heterotrophs. So the autotrophs, basically, they are making everything organic from inorganic. And this can usually happen in photosynthesis. So all the plants you can think of, they are the autotrophs. Heterotrophs, they are consumers. So they cannot convert the inorganic to organic. It's impossible. They can't do that. So what do? They usually eat other animals, and then they are basically being decomposed by other animals too. It's like fish, lions, and insect. Now, when we talk about photosynthesis, in which you probably going to learn this, or you already have learned this in 2.9, I mean, here is just talking about the autotrophs nutrition. You have the sun, and then, of course, the sun is providing the light to the plants, and then the plants are using this light in order to make organic molecules, in this case, glucose. And then this glucose will be fed by the heterotroph because he will ingest the plant, as you can see. So the organism here, such as this little goat here, it cannot just get the energy from the sun. He will need the plant in order to convert the inorganic to organic. So when it comes to autotrophs, they can do photosynthesis or chemosynthesis. The chemosynthesis, it will just means that they will use the oxidation of inorganic chemicals, while photosynthesis, it has to do with turning the sunlight into organic. In both case scenarios, these 2 types here, it's all about going to make organic molecules. That's what it is. But this one is with the light and this one is with chemicals. That's the only difference. But these two can only be done with plants. So when it comes to the heterotrophs, we have consumers. We have 3 different types of consumers. One of the consumers is herbivore, which is it just feeds on plants. The carnivores, they just feed on animals. And omnivores, they feed on both. That means animals and plants. Now, when it comes to eating detrivores, here's the most important thing about detrivore, that is ingested. That means they're eating non-living material, right? They're dead. They're basically dead. But they get this by internal digestion. That means they have to put the food inside of them and then chew it. So, for example, earthworm, loot lice, you need to know examples of these because they will ask you examples of detrivore. When it comes to saprotroph, it's the opposite. It still is eating non-living organic matters, but the difference is it's like they're spitting the enzymes out of their body, and then when the enzyme chews on the food on the outside, then they start absorbing the product. So imagine it's like instead of you eating the hamburger, you throw your spit, your saliva to the hamburger, let the saliva digest the hamburger, and then you just suck the liquid in. That's what the saprotrophs are doing. And usually these are known as the decomposers. So for example, fungi and bacteria, they are known as the decomposers. Now we have a nutrient cycle here. When we talk about the nutrient cycle here, we are talking about how nutrients are moving from one place to the other, and that means they can keep coming again and again. Now there is 2 that you have to know. So from all this information that is written here, which you can pause the video is reading, is that nutrients can continue along the cycle. So that means they can go from an animal to the soil, from the soil to the animal to the air, maybe then goes back to the soil. So it's a cycle that is moving on. Now, here is an example of that. We have the light, right? And you have size of organic compound. Now, here it starts with the light, right? The light is being taken by the plant through photosynthesis. The plant is making glucose. The glucose is eaten by the animal, and then this animal is by another animal, and then when this animal dies, it is decomposed by a fungus, right? And then the fungus uses this energy and give it to the soil, which then the plants can use the soil, the energy. In this case, it can be carbon, it can be iron, it can be phosphate that was in the animals, and then it keeps the cycle going. But if you notice here in the cycle, one thing that does not go through the cycle is light. Light starts, but then the cycle here is just for phosphate, calcium, any kind of minerals you can think about. They can keep going in this cycle here. But when it comes to light, the light is the only thing that is non-cyclic. Okay? So just to be clear, light is the only one that cannot be recycled what matter can be. And when we talk about matter, we talk about carbs, proteins, lipids, minerals, vitamins. These all can be recycled as they go from the animal to the soil back to the plant to the animal, and it just keeps cycling all the time. So now we're going to talk about mesocosm, which is an experiment that you must know about. Mesocosms, they're usually a very enclosed environment. So you can see, like we enclose here in a bottle. And inside of this bottle, you kind of made like a small little earth. And in this earth, you're going to have some of the requirements in there. Now you can see that some of these guys can last for thousands of years. And this one here can last for 400,000 years as long as you have it balanced. It's like having a mini earth inside these bottles. So what are the requirements to make these bottles? You definitely need water, soil, plant, animal, decompose, and air. And it's the most important thing is that it has to be balanced, because if you have too much of one thing and less of the other, then the cycle will be broken down. And here is a very good picture showing all the possible things that you can put in that bottle. Now, here is the advantage of doing a mesocosm. The advantage is that you can control the environment, right? You can manipulate factors such as the temperature, light, air. You can tell how much temperature you want to put. And you can make many mesocosms. So you can have so many tiny bottles, and you can have so many herbs, and you can manipulate them. And it's very inexpensive. The bad side about this is that they don't have enough space, because you can't put a lion inside of a bottle, can you? No, you can't. So and sometimes you cannot exactly imitate the environment outside. Like the savannah, you cannot put all the animals and plants inside of a bottle, so you cannot be exactly the same, which that means you can also not imitate a hurricane, a rain, or a twister. And sometimes if you want to make a bigger facility of mesocosm, it's very expensive. So one of the requirements is that you know how to build a mesocosm, and you need to know the advantage and disadvantages of it. So this chart right here is a perfect way to write in an essay. And this is pretty much it for section 1.4. We're going to talk about chi-squares too, but this is pretty much it. If you need to know information, you can go through these study guides here. All the questions, these study guides have been answered in the video. And this is another section 2, and that's pretty much it. Thank you.